They buried their dead. They made fire-shaped tools and may have painted on cave walls long before we did. For over 300,000 years, Neanderthals weren't just surviving the Ice Age, they were mastering it. Before Homo sapiens became the only humans on Earth, we shared the world with others. Neanderthals lived across Europe and Western Asia, adapting to frozen mountains, wind-swept plains, and ancient forests. They raised children, cared for the sick, crafted tools with remarkable skill, and passes knowledge across generations. Their story isn't a brief detour in human evolution. It's a fully realized chapter we're only now learning how to read. In this video from Armchair Archaeology, we're not asking how Neanderthals disappeared. We're exploring the world they built. From shelters and hunting strategies to art, burial, and emotion, this was a life rich in memory, meaning, and adaptability. Far from being less evolved, Neanderthals were complex, intelligent humans shaped by a different path through deep time. And by the end of this journey, we'll uncover one remarkable truth that may connect you directly to them, a legacy hidden in your DNA, still influencing your body today. This isn't just prehistory, it's lost history, and it's time we brought it back into focus. Before we dive into the details, remember this: these weren't primitive brutes. They were people, clever, resilient, and capable of awe. If this kind of human history fascinates you, make sure to subscribe to Armchair Archaeology. We explore the stories that textbooks overlook: deep time, lost cultures, and everything in between. Neanderthals didn't arrive suddenly, and they didn't come from nowhere. Their roots trace back over 400,000 years to a shared ancestor with us, Homo heidelbergensis, an early human species that spread into Europe and Western Asia long before Homo sapiens left Africa. One of their likely ancestors was Homo heidelbergensis, a transitional human species known from both African and European fossil sites. Isolated by geography and shaped by climate, this population gradually evolved into something new: Homo neanderthalensis, a uniquely adapted human species built for the rigors of the Ice Age. By around 300,000 years ago, Neanderthals had established themselves across an astonishing territory. From the windswept shores of the Atlantic to the highlands of Central Asia, their range stretched farther than that of any human species before them. In fact, they occupied more land than modern-day China, without cities, roads, or written language. This wasn't random wandering. It was a lasting presence, built on deep knowledge of landscapes, seasonal cycles, and survival strategies passed down across generations. Fossils and tools found at sites like Cima de los Huesos in Spain and Tashiktash in Uzbekistan reveal not just their geographic range, but also the extraordinary span of time they endured. Across tens of thousands of years, they hunted, built, and raised families in environments as diverse as temperate forests, dry steppes, and glacial valleys. What's more, regional differences in tool types and even physical features suggest a level of cultural diversity among Neanderthals. They weren't a single people with one way of life. They were multiple communities, shaped by different climates, ecosystems, and challenges. Long before we arrived in Europe, Neanderthals were already there, entrenched, adaptive, and evolving. Their story isn't a prelude to ours. It's a parallel narrative, a different human journey unfolding across an ancient, ever-changing continent. Neanderthals lived in a world that was in constant flux, a landscape where dramatic climate shifts reshaped the land as frequently as our modern world faces environmental challenges today. Over hundreds of thousands of years, the advance and retreat of massive ice sheets transformed sprawling temperate forests into frozen tundras and then back again. crafting a setting where change was the only constant. Their physical forms were not accidents of nature, but finely tuned adaptations to these extremes. Compact and powerfully built, Neanderthals conserved body heat in conditions that would challenge even modern outdoor adventurers. Their broad nasal passages not only improved their sense of smell, but also warmed the icy air before it entered their lungs. These traits, shaped over millennia, are a testament to natural selection in a world of relentless change. In a way, their bodies were blueprints for survival, biology shaped by hardship and honed by time. Yet, biological adaptation was only part of their strategy. Like modern communities developing innovative solutions in times of crisis, Neanderthals adjusted their behaviors with impressive flexibility. They shifted their territories with the seasons, tracking migrating game, such as reindeer and mammoth, across vast distances. In colder periods, they sought refuge in protected caves or built simple structures from locally available materials. During warmer intervals, they spread out into open environments to exploit new resources. Archaeological evidence, ranging from meticulously flaked stone tools to carefully maintained fire sites, shows that Neanderthals refined their survival techniques over countless generations. While we now debate climate change on global platforms, these ancient peoples faced similar challenges on a daily basis, adapting and innovating in ways that resonate with our own modern struggles. Their story is not one of passive endurance. It's a chronicle of resilience and inventiveness in an ever-changing world. For decades, Neanderthal tools were seen as simple, rough flakes of stone, functional but unsophisticated. That view no longer holds. The more we study their craftsmanship, the more we realize their technology wasn't just effective, it was ingenious. The core of their toolkit is known as the Mousterian industry, a term used to describe the carefully crafted stone tools associated with Neanderthal sites across Europe and Western Asia. These tools weren't made randomly. They were produced using a complex method called Levallois flaking, an approach that involved shaping a stone core in precise ways to create a flake of desired size and sharpness. It required foresight, spatial reasoning, and hands-on skill. Think of it like carving the perfect mold before casting, designing the result before making the strike. In a sense, it was an ancient form of strategic design. Neanderthals didn't just use stone. At some sites, they appear to have hafted tools, attaching stone points to wooden handles using natural adhesives like birch pitch. Creating pitch from tree bark requires controlled heating in low oxygen conditions, a process so technical that it wasn't replicated in a lab until modern archaeologists attempted it. It may be one of the earliest known chemical processes, thousands of years before Homo sapiens showed evidence of similar techniques. They also controlled fire, not only by preserving natural flames, but likely by generating it themselves. Fire was essential for warmth, cooking, light, and protection. Some archaeological sites even hint at possible wooden shelters or windbreaks built to create more livable spaces. Neanderthal technology wasn't a crude imitation of ours. It was tailored to their world. Every blade struck, every resin boiled, every fire kindled was part of a sophisticated system of survival. They weren't just users of tools, they were engineers of experience, responding to the challenges of their time with precision, creativity, and deep understanding. If you're fascinated by ancient innovation, you'll love our new ebook, Secrets of the Ancient World. From the Antikythera mechanism to ancient surgery, it explores how surprisingly advanced early civilizations really were. The link's in the pinned comment, go check it out. We often imagine Neanderthals huddled in caves, but that image only tells part of the story. While caves offered protection from predators and harsh weather, Neanderthals' shelter extended far beyond rocky walls. They adapted their living spaces to fit diverse environments, creating homes that reveal organization, memory, and even ingenuity. Caves were certainly valuable, especially during cold periods, and many sites, like La Ferracie in France or Shanidar in Iraq, show repeated use over thousands of years. These weren't random stopovers. Hearths were carefully maintained. Tools and bones were clustered by function, and space was clearly divided for different activities. Some areas may have been used for cooking, others for tool-making or resting. These choices reflect forethought and shared routines. But outside the caves, something even more remarkable appears. At the open-air site of Moldova in Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered an oval-shaped structure framed by mammoth bones and anchored with large stones. It likely supported a covering of wood, hide, or both, possibly an early version of a semi-permanent dwelling. It's one of the clearest signs that Neanderthals could manipulate their environment to build shelters, not just find them. These weren't improvised camps. They were intentional living spaces. In both caves and open sites, repeated occupation layers suggest that Neanderthals returned to familiar places year after year, places that may have held meaning beyond simple survival. That sense of place, of home, is something we instinctively recognize. In these spaces, Neanderthals cooked meals, repaired tools, cared for the young and the elderly, and likely told stories by firelight. Shelters weren't just practical. They were the backdrop for social life, memory, and continuity. Their homes, like ours, were built not just from materials, but from relationships, experience, and the rhythm of daily life. For much of the 20th century, scientists believed Neanderthals lacked symbolic thought. They were toolmakers, yes, but not artists, not dreamers. That view is changing rapidly. New discoveries suggest they not only shaped their world physically, but may have marked it with meaning as well. In caves like La Pasiega in Spain, researchers have found painted symbols, abstract shapes made with red pigment, dated to at least 64,000 years ago. That's over 20,000 years before Homo sapiens are thought to have arrived in the region. If those dates are accurate, Neanderthals were the artists, not imitators, creators. Other clues hint at the same capacity for symbolic behavior. Pierced shells, likely worn as pendants, pigments like ochre and manganese, collected and stored, and eagle talons, carefully modified, possibly as personal ornaments. These items point to an awareness of self-image, group identity, or even ritual behaviors deeply familiar to us. To decorate the body is to say, I belong, I remember, I feel. And then there's Bruniquel Cave in southern France. Deep within its dark passages, Neanderthals arranged hundreds of broken stalagmites into circular formations 170,000 years ago. No practical function has been identified, but the effort it took, the planning it required, and the decision to venture into total darkness all suggest an activity steeped in intention, perhaps ritual, perhaps ceremony. These are the quiet signals of a symbolic mind. While we may never know exactly what Neanderthals believed, the evidence increasingly points to an inner life rich with expression and meaning. Symbolism isn't just about art, it's about identity, memory, and connection. And it now appears that Neanderthals, too, sought to mark their presence in the world, not only with tools and fire, but with something deeply human, the need to be remembered. What do you think? Were Neanderthals artists in their own right? Or were these expressions something else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing how you interpret the evidence. How a culture treats its dead can tell us volumes about its values. and Neanderthals may have understood that truth long before we did. Across Europe and Western Asia, archaeologists have found signs that Neanderthals didn't simply leave their dead where they fell. They buried them. At sites like La Chapelle-aux-Saints in France and Shanidar Cave in Iraq, skeletons have been found lying in shallow pits, positioned carefully, protected from the elements. In some cases, stone tools or animal bones were nearby, possibly offerings, or at least deliberate inclusions. These weren't accidental burials caused by natural collapse. They were intentional. One of the most debated discoveries comes from Shanidar Cave, where pollen from flowering plants was found near a Neanderthal grave. Some researchers believe the flowers were deliberately placed, suggesting symbolic or emotional behavior, though others question the interpretation. Still, even without floral rituals, the very act of burial speaks volumes. Neanderthals also cared for the living in ways that echo through time. Many buried individuals show signs of illness or injury. One man at Shanidar had a crushed arm, a damaged eye socket, and a withered leg, but lived for years in that condition. He couldn't have survived alone. Someone tended to him. Someone made the choice to care. Burial, caregiving, and remembrance suggest a culture that valued more than just survival. These actions imply a sense of community and emotional life, a recognition of self and others that extends beyond the moment. We don't know what Neanderthals believed about death, but we do know this: they remembered their dead, honored them, and likely mourned them. And that single truth brings us closer to them than almost any artifact ever could. Neanderthal life was shaped by the rhythms of food: tracking, hunting, gathering, cooking, and sharing. And far from being one-dimensional meat-eaters, they were flexible, knowledgeable, and attentive to the resources around them. They were skilled hunters, often targeting massive animals like mammoths, woolly rhinos, and bison. Their weapons, wooden spears tipped with stone points, were effective at close range, suggesting that hunts were cooperative and highly coordinated. But they didn't rely solely on big game. In warmer regions, they hunted smaller animals, gathered plants, nuts, seeds, and even foraged for mushrooms and wild fruits. What they ate varied by location, and that's where things get interesting. In El Cedrón Cave in Spain, researchers analyzed dental plaque from Neanderthal remains and found traces of moss, nuts, and bitter plants, including poplar bark, a natural source of salicylic acid, the active ingredient in aspirins. They may have been using plants for pain relief, an ancient form of herbal medicine passed down through lived experience. And they may have known even more. At other sites, traces of yarrow and chamomile, bitter and not nutritious, suggest medicinal use, not food. Cooking was a regular part of their routine. Burnt bones, hearth remains, and even starch grains embedded in fossilized plaque all point to the use of fire not just for warmth, but for preparing food. Meals may have been shared communally, around hearths that served as social centers. Daily life also included tool maintenance, hide preparation, fire tending, and likely child rearing. Wear patterns on teeth suggest they used their mouths almost like extra hands, holding or softening materials for tool making or sewing. Their lifestyle wasn't crude, it was practical, complex, and intimately connected to their environment. Like us, they built their days around nourishment, work, care, and community. And like us, they found ways to heal, adapt, and thrive, one meal, one fire, one season at a time. If you'd like to support the channel and help us keep exploring these stories, consider hitting the Super Thanks button. Every contribution helps keep Armchair Archaeology digging into the past. Neanderthal survival wasn't just about tools and toughness, it was about each other. Across the archaeological record, we find signs of close social bonds, caregiving, cooperation, and deep interpersonal connection. These weren't isolated individuals fending for themselves. They lived and endured together. In Shanidar Cave, one individual was found with a crushed arm, partial blindness, and a severely damaged leg. He lived with these injuries for years, long past the point where he could have hunted or gathered on his own. At La Chapelle-aux-Saints, an elderly Neanderthal had lost most of his teeth, yet still lived long enough for his jawbone to fully heal. Someone must have helped him eat, stay warm, and find shelter. These aren't rare cases. Repeated patterns of long-term care suggest that Neanderthal groups consistently protected their vulnerable members. In doing so, they show us something profoundly human, a social structure built on empathy, memory, and responsibility. Children were also part of daily life. Their bones appear in burial sites, and smaller tools found nearby may have been made by or for them. Skill transmission likely happened through observation and imitation, the same way young humans still learn today. And then there's the extraordinary discovery from a Siberian cave, the remains of a small Neanderthal group, including a father and his teenage daughter, along with other close relatives. This wasn't just a hunting party, it was a family. Far from being solitary or emotionally flat, Neanderthal communities appear rich with connection. They raised children, cared for the elderly, and adapted their world to make space for every member of the group. Their strength wasn't just physical, it was social. In the face of an unpredictable world, their relationships may have been their greatest survival tool. The Neanderthals weren't the only ancient people with rich, complex societies. In our ebook, Secrets of the Ancient World, we dive into other lost civilizations, like the Indus Valley and the Olmec, and explore what they still have to teach us. Links in the pinned comment. Around 45,000 years ago, a new kind of human arrived in Europe. Homo sapiens, our species, was entering a landscape already inhabited by Neanderthals, a species that had thrived there for hundreds of thousands of years. For a long time, this moment was framed as a confrontation, a superior species replacing an inferior one. But the truth is far more complex and far more human. In regions like the Levant, Central Europe, and even parts of Western Asia, archaeological evidence shows that Neanderthals and Homo sapiens shared territory for thousands of years. They likely crossed paths often, at watering holes, along migration routes, or while tracking the same herds. Their toolkits began to show similarities. Ornaments and symbolic artifacts appear in both groups. This wasn't just proximity, it was interaction. We now know that these encounters went beyond observation or competition. In some places, they likely lived side by side for generations. Some researchers believe cultural ideas and survival strategies were exchanged, and as these two worlds came into contact, they formed relationships, complex, personal, and lasting. Eventually, Neanderthals began to fade from the record. Climate instability made food more difficult to find. Small, scattered populations may have struggled to maintain their numbers. Homo sapiens, with their broader social networks and flexible technologies, may have had a survival edge in the long run, but this was not a simple conquest. In some regions, Neanderthals weren't just replaced, they were absorbed. Their presence didn't end, it transformed. Their memory didn't vanish, it was carried forward. And while we haven't yet revealed the full impact of that connection, we will. Because the story of how Homo sapiens and Neanderthals met didn't just change the past, it still shapes our present. Neanderthals walked the earth for over 300,000 years. They hunted, raised families, adapted to ice and fire, and shaped landscapes from the Atlantic to Central Asia. And yet, by around 40,000 years ago, their presence had almost entirely vanished. But this wasn't a dramatic extinction. It was a slow, quiet transformation, one that still resists simple explanations. Their decline coincided with multiple pressures. As climate patterns shifted dramatically during the late Pleistocene, the ecosystems they relied on became unstable. Herds moved differently. Forests turned to grasslands. Some familiar resources vanished entirely. Neanderthal populations, already small and scattered, may have become isolated, unable to recover after harsh winters or local disasters. At the same time, Homo sapiens were spreading through Europe. These new arrivals brought flexible toolkits, long-distance networks, and perhaps more adaptive social structures. They could share information across regions, support larger groups, and switch strategies quickly. In many places, this gave them an edge. But this wasn't an invasion. It was a gradual, overlapping presence. Neanderthals didn't disappear overnight. In southern Iberia, they held on for thousands of years after they'd vanished elsewhere. In other regions, their material culture seems to blend with that of Homo sapiens, suggesting contact, exchange, and interconnection. Their disappearance wasn't a failure. It was a slow merging, a quiet vanishing into the tide of a changing world. Like a melody fading into another song, their story blended into ours, not erased, but transformed. What they left behind wasn't just abandoned shelters or stone tools. They left traces that endured, in memories, in borrowed traditions, and in something far more lasting. The end of their world wasn't truly the end. It was a transformation, a folding of one human story into another. And as we'll see in the conclusion, a part of that world may still live on in us. We often imagine Neanderthals as a side note in our story, an evolutionary dead end. But what we've uncovered reveals something far more powerful. For over 300,000 years, they endured and adapted through glacial winters, shifting landscapes, and endless challenges. They crafted tools, raised families, honored their dead, and may have marked their world with art. They weren't a failure. They were a success on their own terms, in their own time. They walked the same earth, felt the same cold, nurtured the same warmth in family, fire, and memory. And though their world has vanished, it wasn't lost without a trace. Here's the fun fact we promised. If you have ancestry from Europe or Asia, there's a strong chance that 1 to 2% of your DNA comes from Neanderthals. Their genes are still inside you, shaping how your immune system reacts to pathogens, how your skin responds to sunlight, even how your body stores fat. They are not just fossils in a museum. They are a part of your biology. And if you're hungry for more ancient mysteries, from Stonehenge to lost cities like Thonis Heraclean, Secrets of the Ancient World is the perfect next step. It's designed to fuel your curiosity, just like these videos. You'll find the link in the pinned comment below. So the Neanderthals didn't entirely disappear. They were absorbed, remembered, and carried forward, not just in culture, but in blood. Their story didn't end. It became part of ours. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the world they left behind. If you found this exploration meaningful, we invite you to support our channel, Armchair Archaeology, by liking this video and subscribing for more immersive journeys into the human past. That helps us bring you more stories like this one. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new discovery. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. What ancient peoples or mysteries should we explore next? Tell us in the comments. Until our next adventure, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the flame of curiosity burning bright.